can't have a conversation about race in the criminal justice system without somebody talking about the new Jim Crow.
The new Jim Crow is basically the Bible when it comes to answering questions around mass incarceration.
The new Jim Crow is about how our system of mass incarceration threatens to undermine everything that we've worked for to get to this point in this country.
If you think of the whole 200 years this nation's been in existence, we've incarcerated more people in the last 20 years than we did for the entire history of the United States.
About reading the new Jim Crow, Michelle Alexander approached it initially from a skeptical point of view. And she started it by saying that she was someone who didn't believe that the prison industrial complex could be compared to slavery. And it was sort of taking the journey with her. As she learned things, she was sharing them with people.
The new Jim Crow makes the argument that our criminal justice system, especially the war on drugs component of it, has become a new system of racial caste subordination that operates very much like the old system of Jim Crow.
Well, it's called the new Jim Crow because slavery is something that powered the South. And when that ended, they struggled to quickly find ways to maintain that system, but do it in a legal way. And the Jim Crow system was the best thing they came up with. It was a way to get people to still be indentured servants. You bust them on minor offenses or things that are really trivial, and they're now in debt. And in order to pay off this debt, they now have to work on your farm, and they are working at wages that don't allow them to ever work off this debt. So there was actually a report written for the Nixon administration when he was running to say, listen, we have to demonize these people. We have to make it look like black people and these people in their cities are the problem. And that is our clear path to winning these elections.
So that which should be a public health concern has now become a criminal justice concern because there is a policy decision, in my view, that certain people are disposable.
The convict label is a huge issue, and I think it's really one of the signal contributions of the book, is the way in which Michelle is able to focus on that and really kind of describe some of the just sort of powerful ways in which you are permanently stigmatized. It's called in the criminal justice system collateral consequences, but really we could think of it as lifetime punishment because that's in so many cases what it is.
They've made it impossible for people to rehabilitate when they come out of prison. The system is designed to break you and designed to make you feel like you're not a part of the society.
You can't get a job because there's the boxes that you have to check. Have you ever been convicted of a crime?
And we've added to the number of categories, housing and jobs. We've made it harder in both of those areas as well.
Once you're labeled as a felon, you're barred from public housing, barred from public assistance, meaning welfare, and you're excluded from specific grants or loans for college.
Oh, why would you send these convicts to college? Because maybe they'll come out and join the workforce, right? Maybe there'll be an actual skill that people can use.
So now, no housing, no vote, no job. And what we are asking you to do, supposedly, is to reintegrate into society. But we're making it close to impossible for you to succeed in that task. And that, to me, is one of the just most profound injustices.
Madam President, we have predators on our streets that society has, in fact, in part because of its neglect, created. Again, it does not mean because we created them that we somehow forgive them or do not take them out of society to protect my family and yours from them. They are beyond the pale, many of those people.
Another thing about how perspectives change over time. Bobby Rush, member of Congress, said the other day, I'm ashamed that I voted for the '94 crime bill. You ashamed of that bill?
Not at all. In fact, I drafted the bill, as you remember.
I know that.
And by the
Greetings. My name is William Guston. I'm the Executive Resource Officer and chairman of the Central Committee for the National Plus Coalition. The New Jim Crow, chronicled by attorney Michelle Alexander, is a stunning account of the rebirth of a caste-like system in the United States. One that has resulted in the incarceration of many African American people being denied those rights supposedly won during the civil rights movement. As America celebrates its triumph over race with the election of Barack Obama as president, the majority of black men in major urban areas are subject to correctional control or saddled with criminal records for life. Jim Crow laws were wiped off the books decades ago. However, an extraordinary percentage of African American people are warehoused in prison or trapped in a parallel social universe, being denied basic civil and human rights, the right to vote, the right to serve on juries, the right to be free of legal discrimination in housing, the access to education and public benefits. So tonight, and for the remainder of the week, the National Plus Coalition will be challenging the civil rights community and all of America to place mass incarceration at the forefront of the new movement of racial and social justice and equality. This event will be hosted.
Hi, everyone. This is Brooke, the Vice President for the National Plus Coalition. I would like to thank our host and all of our speakers for being present with us for this event. And I would like to introduce our host for this whole week, Miss Lulu Cameron. She is an author, public speaker, founder of South Carolina for Restorative Justice, and co-host of new series Second Chances. She is a vetted ally in ending the inhumane practices of mass incarceration, building with both national players and local grassroots organizations, never forgetting the ability and powerful minds that are locked behind those walls, many deserving an opportunity of freedom. Thank you for being with us tonight, Lulu.
Thank you so much, Brooke, for the introduction. And Gus, nothing makes anything perfect without a little technical difficulty, right? So that's how I know this evening is going to be impactful and filled with information. I think that the most important thing that we need to understand is that knowledge is power. And a lot of things that are happening out here in today's society, we don't really know how to move with them or against them or around them because we don't understand them in the full capacity. So tonight and throughout the duration of this week, I will be hosting some amazing, powerful, impactful speakers. I look forward to all of their words of wisdom and knowledge in regards to the various topics that we'll discuss as it relates to the new Jim Crow. And then just without further ado, I'll get right to our first speaker. Our first speaker is a powerhouse. I like to call him on the sidelines, Mr. Free the 13th himself. We have Dennis Febo. Dennis Febo has a master's degree in humanities. He's a speaker, community organizer, artist, abolitionist, and CEO and founder of Gazawabada Insights, LLC. Dennis is a native of Brooklyn, New York, raised in many different parts of the U.S. and Puerto Rico. He attained his master's degree from the University of Buffalo, Havana, Cuba, and Baja. Dennis has been working with thousands of our incarcerated community members and juveniles for the past 7 years by a curriculum for cultural and social consciousness, education. Dennis has been able to educate thousands around the country on self-knowledge and self-actualization. Provides many educational resources and recreational services and events for the community at large with a focus on success for our youth. Dennis has also founded the Amend the 13th movement in New Jersey, a lobbying strategy to remove the exceptions and add anti-slavery language to the New Jersey Constitution. is also a professor of graduate and undergraduate studies in health sciences at New Jersey Central University. Welcome, Dennis. It is a pleasure to have you.
Peace, peace, family. Thank you for having me. Thank you for bringing me on board with this. Anything to do to spread the message for freedom. So, yeah, my name is Dennis Febo. Thank you for the introduction. Again, I've been working with our incarcerated populations here out of the state of New Jersey and in other states as well, but most of my work is out of New Jersey. I've helped a lot of people. I've heard as many stories as I can hear with as many people that I've seen coming in and out of those buildings. And I've gotten a good grasp and understanding of what the needs are, why we're in there. I've gotten a grasp and understanding on how these government departments and budgets and decisions are made. And throughout all my experience, I started to really think about how powerful legislation is, that sometimes we'll be out here fighting and screaming about something we need, and all they need is one sentence in a law, and all of that changes, right? So I kept looking at it. Almost of any program, a computer software program, has coding. And if that coding has a misspelling or improper period or just one wrong symbol, the rest of the software won't work, right? There'll be a glitch in the system. And we understand coding and law to be the same thing. We suffer socially, economically, culturally, in many different ways because the coding in the software is wrong, right? And here we're saying it's wrong because we want to align, especially in our own identities, whether I'm a New Jerseyan or a New Yorker or an American. I want to be able to stand tall and proud and say, look, this is the code. When we say this is the land of the free, I can really say that and believe it and feel honored and prideful about being an American, right? When I'm inside the jail and I'm running group, I do this on purpose. I'll say, who here is an American? Raise your hand. And only 2 or 3 will go like this. Nobody goes like this, right? When I'm in rooms full of corrections officers or people who work for the system, and I say, who's an American? They all go like this, right? So to me, it was always visual and evident to see you have an entire population. Now here we're saying 2.3 million people. Well, we're going to say 2.5 incarcerated, right? Going through this. And now, while I know the discussion could go back and forth about why someone is in there, it's really about data. So sometimes we get caught in circular arguments with people about our ability as a society to dehumanize another based on moral actions or moral belief structures. The fact that our own cultural code in our society permits this to happen and that we do it, we participate in the dehumanization process. Whatever has been written in law has now expressed itself in the social code. So people go, but what do you mean by the code of the law? We'll stand up and we'll say something like, well, this is a slave-based system. And people will laugh. Oh, where do you see people picking cotton? I'm like, there's people picking cotton right now, and they're picking okra, and they're doing all kinds of jobs all around the country for free. So the imagery and the definition and the understanding of what we've gotten, and I'm talking about all of history, has been miseducation. Now we have to deal as abolitionists with an entire misinformed populace about the truth of their own history, about the truth of the participation of their ancestors in this history, thus disconnecting us from that process, disconnecting us from the truth and understanding. And that's why we can't really pull it together. Because first we need to know the truth. And the truth in this country, you don't have to go far. There's only one document that matters. It's called the Constitution. And in the Constitution, 13 sentences down is a sentence that says, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude are illegal except. So we just celebrated, which I felt like I was losing my mind. I was in the middle of a twilight zone. Juneteenth being a federal holiday. right? People walking around wearing shirts that say 1865, and we will walk up to them and say, why'd you use that year? And people say, I don't know. So it was a fad. It was a little buzz that made us. And basically, what they did was throw us a bone, because the day they announced Juneteenth was the day Merkley went to announce that we had an abolition amendment to permanently end slavery in the United States. So the day we're gonna ask or declare we're gonna end slavery is the same day you make it a holiday, right? So we don't understand moving forward. And I've been doing this for a couple of years now. And if you could imagine what I knew when I started versus what I know now, and all of the people I've talked to and all the organizing I've done, I've gotten pretty keen in the understanding, not just from using my personal experience, but also hitting the books and finding how these things are found to be legal. So first and foremost, there's a serious lack of understanding for most of us. And I'm going to ask this question. It's open-ended. I want you to think about it. But most of us don't, and I need you to. And that is, what is the difference between a human and a civil right? When I'm in the jail and the guys go, Febo, man, the cops called me, man, they violated my rights. And I say, which one? Which right they violate? I don't know my rights. So now we know that there's something there, right? We know that we feel crossed or offended or oppressed or infringed upon, but we can never really pinpoint what it is. And in a court of law, that ain't gonna fly. In a court of law, the way you stand in front of a judge, the way you speak to your lawyer, anywhere you go, you know how to move, because you're right as a human being, as a spiritual being, having a human experience, what we like to call natural law in a Judeo-Christian society, where the man that they worship as God grabbed 12 convicts and was trying to teach them how to be like himself. But we live in a Judeo-Christian society that praises Jesus on Sunday, and on Monday, they're dehumanizing people in prisons across the country and all of the territories. Yeah. Now we start to see how we measure this. And I started to look at it. One of the government officials asked me, Dennis, I really like and I understand and I honor that you're trying to end slavery. But tell me, where do you see slavery? Most of us like to allude to the private prison construct, which is a very evident and very clear slave-based structure, right? But now we're going to say, what about the public side? So when we have public county jails and state prisons, who's benefiting from slavery? We could talk about all the communications companies, all the food companies, medical services providers, social workers, every level of service within such system and all those private contracts, all of the salaries of every corrections officer, of every administrator, and all of their pensions until the day that they die. If you add all that money up, the millions and millions and millions of dollars, the United States spends $174 billion a year. It surpasses the gross domestic product of 143 nations in the world. And when you start to look at what population is in there, you start to see that it's black and brown. So when I come out and I say we want to end slavery and people go, well, I'm like, are you crazy? Are you insane that we don't recognize on paper, looking at the numbers, that this is what's going on? So there's only two arguments. Melanin leads to criminality, or this is a racist system. And the former was disproved in 2000, when we already showed there was no relationship between melanization of the skin and behavior. That's over. That was called scientific racism. And it ended once we decoded the Human Genome Project. So for anyone to argue otherwise, you're arguing for scientific racism. And the way a student of biology is called a biologist, a student of racism is called a racist. And for any one of us to subscribe to any construct derived from such, for those of us that came from the lineage of kings and queens and philosophers and mathematicians and founders of all the religions in the world, how did I become a color? So now we start to talk about, all right, what's the solution? Number one, for all the prison reformists, all the prison abolitionists, anybody out there doing social justice work, and you have not had a conversation about ending slavery, what our forefathers fought for, Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, John Brown, the Civil War, 680,000 deaths that mostly white men died for, to end or keep what we think now is slavery. What we think now, we've read in a textbook, same images. No depth in the understanding of what this economic and political contract consists of. Because the purpose of abolishing of the play between 3/5, the 13th Amendment, Black codes, and segregation and thereon all had to do with one thing: propertization of the body. To make the body property. If you make the body property, it decivilizes and dehumanizes. You lose access to both routes of your own rights. So people say, you know, prisoners lost the right to vote. How? Where in the language does it say prisoners can't vote?
Right.
And when you start to dig a little bit deeper, you're going to see that it says because they lack, as according to the Supreme Court, lacked 13th Amendment rights. What does that mean? A really legal, nice way of saying use a slave. You are property of the state. You are insured, which is why it's called a bond. And that's why you have to pay a bond in order to be able to get away from it. Right? Propertization of the body leads to profitization of the body. Sometimes when I'm in group and I'm talking to the guys about the ills of our community and what we could do, I tell them all the time, y'all warriors. Yeah? Some of y'all here do things that most people would shy away from or feel like they couldn't do. But something about you has this spirit, this gall that you're willing to do. And now imagine if we all applied ourselves. Now we talk about poverty as the link to it. And I go, you know where all the money is, guys? And they go, where? I go, in this room. If I add all the money that's flowing through each and every single one of your bodies in this room, and we took that pool of money and we went into the community, we'd resolve the issues. That's how much they spend. Here in New Jersey, our youth are quoted at $420,000 a year, including external services. But we only spend $29,000 a year to educate them. And because we know that education is the #1 indicator to all social ill, we can start it right there, which is what we call the school to prison pipeline. And what does this mean? I take a little black boy and I put him in a holding cell, and then I wrap his body in chains, and then I tell him he's a criminal or he's a super predator, and I bring him in front of the judge, and the judge puts stipulations on him and the family that they can't meet. So then they violate him, and over and over, and by the end of whatever stint he did, he's already been conditioned to think that this is okay.
Yeah.
I had one of the guys tell me he remembered when he was younger getting in trouble and getting taken to one of these facilities where it was open green fields. They had chocolate milk on tap. They had everything they needed there. And every time he'd come home and get in trouble or felt like he didn't belong, he'd always say to himself, I'm going home. And home to him meant to go to the facility. So when we talk about slavery, slavery wasn't just an economic condition. It was also a psychological condition. And the reason we haven't freed ourselves from it, because we understand subconsciously it's not over. What would it look like? What would it sound like to be in a world in the United States of America where slavery is illegal? And now, as I pushed you here in New Jersey, and everybody thought I was crazy, everybody thought I was crazy. But I had a couple of legislators agree that this was the case. So therefore, we advocated to push a bill here in New Jersey to add language to the Constitution. See, people don't know. The Emancipation Proclamation did not end slavery. The Emancipation Proclamation legalized slavery in the 5 border states. The Emancipation Proclamation had nothing to do with the freedom of slavery, thus why Abraham Lincoln pushed for the 13th Amendment. Then we get misinformed. Well, in order to appease the South, they added the exception clause. But if we rewind to 1862, the DC Emancipation Act has the exception clause in it. That was written by Abraham Lincoln. And in that same document, writes for reparations for slave owners. $1 million bond from the Department of Treasury. And if we go even further back and go to 1777 to the state of Vermont, the first state constitution to include the exception clause. This conversation's been had since then, and they've done very well at mastering and the inner workings of how to take advantage of this economic loophole. There are some cities, there are some counties, there are some districts, towns, and maybe even some states that wouldn't exist without legalized slavery in the United States of America. And now the problem is they're trying now, because they know we're keen and we know what's going on, they're pushing back. Departments of Justice, Departments of Correction are pushing back, saying, well, if we end slavery, then we have to revisit every felony conviction. Why would they say that? Why would they say if we end slavery, they have to revisit every felony conviction? Because labor is inherent in a sentence. You can work your time down. That is part good behavior, and work reduce your time. This is why we call it paying your debt to society, right? But you're paying that debt with your body and your labor. And because that's the case and privatization exists, now we have private institutions entered into contract with states who weren't filling the beds in the correctional facility. So the private institution sues the state. So the state doesn't lose. They send their cops out on the street to arrest more people.
I don't think a lot of people know that, but keep going, Dennis.
So the fact that police officers are really debt collectors, because what's the first thing they do when they stop you? They ask you for your ID. Why? Because they want to run you for warrants. Do you have a debt to the court? First and foremost, they are debt collectors. And that did not change since, if I want to go to 1864, well, overseer was stopping you to ask you for the same. Right? Police are an extension of the system. We could never talk about police reform. We have to talk about deprofitizing the system so police don't feel inclined to arrest you for every single little thing that they find, so that they don't incentivize collars or arrests as a means for a police officer to get a promotion. Why are we incentivizing peace officers to arrest people and make money for a system? So when it goes to them, when it comes to prosecutors, who elected prosecutors, 96% of elected prosecutors in the United States of America are white. 67% of those incarcerated are Black and brown. And they have the gall and the nerve to stand there and ask whether or not structural racism exists. Right, but when we look, the numbers never lie, family. Regardless of your philosophical or political stance, numbers don't lie. If you think this is the greatest country in the world and this is a land of the free, then why are we only 5% of the population of the world, but 25% of the world's incarcerated? That to me is one of the biggest embarrassments of being an American. Yeah. That our people are that misbehaved, that our people just don't know and are too juvenile at mind in order to take care of their own, that a system has to care for them. That so much money is invested into such construct, but they won't invest money into the rehabilitation of the people. So we know and understand that from that point on, once someone's put on notice that they are violating a law, and people say, well, what law is being violated? Because what Louisiana, one of the 9 white Republican senators that voted to keep slavery, stated, if you end slavery, you can't come after me. I got immunity. Why would he say that?
Why would he say it? I'm scared.
You know, to argue that when we look at what is the superseding law of this country, in our country, it's international law. And international law comes from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Literally 4 sentences down. You have the opening act, intro sentence. The next sentence says, slavery is abolished in all of its forms. If slavery is abolished in all of its forms, why do we have legalized constitutional slavery in the United States of America? Right? So at all this, we pushed in Colorado, at the same time as I started New Jersey, ended up ending slavery in their constitutional referendum in 2018, followed by Utah and Nebraska in 2020. Right now, we have Vermont, Tennessee, New Jersey, Colorado, Nevada, Oregon, Ohio. We got a bunch of states on their way to the ballot, right? Right now, confirmed Oregon and Tennessee are confirmed on the ballot. All of us came together and decided to push on this on the national level. We didn't want to go through the federal 13th Amendment because we felt we didn't have enough traction, that if we went through the state routes, it was plain a safe bet, right? Even if I might not get it on the federal, at least on the state level, we could argue it in law. So we are running both campaigns concurrently when we say something like free the 13th or amend the 13th, that we're speaking about the state-based campaign. And when we talk about repealing and replacing the 13th Amendment, which means that if we amend it, we scratch out the 13th Amendment and we add the 28th Amendment, which would have language permanently abolishing slavery in the United States. That was reintroduced by Senator Merkley out of Oregon, co-sponsored right now by Bernie Sanders, Cory Booker, Chuck Schumer just jumped on. So a lot of the top dogs are jumping on to the federal bill. And if it will happen to pass in 2023, we have to get 38 states to ratify so that we would permanently end slavery in the United States. Now, I could go on for hours, so this is very introductory. And I just want you guys to have an understanding that this is on the table and that we should never ignore it. I think it should literally be upfront, because once we handle, it's like pulling out the root, right? We're plucking the root out. If you can't profitize, the whole system's going to end up having to reorganize itself. Then let's talk about reform, right? Because now we could say with a clear mind that we understand that whatever structure they were trying to ride on, they can't ride on anymore. What does justice look like without profit? Can justice look like justice? Right? That's the real question. Does it have to have slavery? Absolutely not. I think they prefer it to. Right? But the fact that we're holding on to these vestiges says that much. So right now, the Abolish Slavery National Network was formed. We celebrated our 1-year anniversary on August 28th. We're calling out to anyone that wants to join the movement and help. And basically, it's to educate our people. What I like about this movement is that it's a political referendum question, which means if I go to the hood here in Jersey City and I go, let's go vote, they're going to go, get out of here, Febo. I ain't going to vote. Who won't vote for? They don't even know who's running for. I don't care about voting. But if I tell them we need to vote to end slavery, and because most of them have been impacted by it and know what I'm talking about, I know that I have a better chance of bringing them to the polls, which is why New Jersey has been stonewalling us for the past couple of months, because it's a gubernatorial election and they didn't want this question riding on his election campaign, right? So there's a whole lot more at play to just that. We're increasing political participation and people who would come vote who normally wouldn't, which that alone would cause a wave and change in the system. That the Fair Labor Standards Act would have to change because their last proceeding stated that lack of 13th Amendment rights did not allow a prisoner to be classified as an employee and have all the rights and benefits to do so, right? And what does that mean? That maybe if a brother and sister was incarcerated, could earn money while they work, when they get sent home, they have a nest egg they could rely on, and or they could also be sustaining their family from behind the wall. Because guess who has to sustain their family for them? We do. Let them work. Let them have dignity. Let them be human beings, even though they may have committed a crime, even though they made a mistake. I'm telling you, as somebody who's been in those buildings for a really long time, you'd be really surprised standing in the middle of all of them and just seeing that they're normal as people. Like, it's people. They're human beings. They have love in them. They have their own trials and tribulations. And if you heard some of their stories, you would understand why they're in there. A lot of us are in positions that we're in, and it's not even our fault. It was those that came before us that got us there, right? And why did they get us there? Because those before them, and if I go back enough lines, it was slavery. So we ain't free from it. And this is the condition we find ourselves in. And in order to be a freedom fighter, for me, you have to aim for the highest goal, right? That's like in any battle. You want to go for the crown. What's the crown? Slavery, free labor, disenfranchisement from the vote. How many of our brothers and sisters come out losing the ability to vote for the rest of their lives in many states around the union? How is that possible? The same exact intention they had back in right before the Civil War. That was the intention. That's why they said 3/5. They didn't want us to have power. But now here we're saying power that we can grab for ourselves, power that we can achieve by making sure that we never stop until they change that one sentence. Delete 13 words from the 13th Amendment, except as punishment for a crime where a party shall have been duly convicted, right? With that, there's a whole lot more to it. If you want to know more, you can go to abolishslavery.us. That is our national website. You can also go to endtheexception.com. There's a tool there that all you have to do is write your name and your information. When you hit send, it'll populate emails to your legislators to let them know that you stand with this. It's very simple. I mean, that's the minimal amount of effort you could put in, literally just filling out a form and sending out an email. Anything else is doing events like these brothers and sisters are doing, bringing it together and trying to educate the public on what's going on and what needs to get done. The other could be voter registration drives. The other could be, I don't know, there's so much you could do to get the word out, but we really need to start narrating the truth. Stop with the bullshit about Emancipation Proclamation and Juneteenth and all the nonsense that has to take us away from the fact that it's right in front of our faces. And if you think this doesn't affect you, just get pulled over on the wrong day by the wrong cop and go in front of the wrong judge, and you know what I'm talking about. With that being said, blessings and I share to all.
Yes, thank you so much. I think, you really said a mouthful. Can I just get you to repeat the link where people who are listening can go to actually send those letters to their legislators so that we can get that out there?
Yeah, that'll be at endtheexception.com. Endtheexception.com.
All right, and we'll have one of the moderators put that in the chat for people to go ahead and complete that. A few things that you said, and we'll leave the questions for later on after we listen to our next speaker. There's a couple of things that, as I'm doing this work, they constantly come up and they constantly are like nagging from one way or another. And the one thing is humanizing the incarceration. They're human beings. Treating people as though they are a part of society allows people to re-enter society, wanting to actually be a part of it instead of having to be like a misfit in the situation. And then another thing, allowing them to have that responsibility so that they know what that looks like and walks like once they do return to society. That's major. That's really major. And a lot of people are just like, throw them away and lock up, throw the key away and lock them up like they're wild animals. And some of the best animals in the world that I've met are incarcerated in the United States of America. So that's something. And then the one thing that you mentioned about the abolitionists and that whole argument can go on for days and days and days, but I think you said it very well. You basically said, let's break down the system that they know and allow there to be real justice and not this idea that justice stems from people to empower an economy, because that's what people, we went from being owned by actual people to being owned by the government. And so I love to hear you speak, Febo. I've been a personal witness to your growth over time, as I'm sure many have for me as well. And so it was just a pleasure listening to you. I look forward to the question and answer. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Blessings, Queen.
Thank you. Up next, everyone, we have Maurice Clifton. And Maurice Clifton is going to be speaking with us about racial profiling and the 3.5 compromise. Maurice was born and raised in Mound Bayou, Mississippi. He went to prison at the age of 31 as a first-time drug offender, aiding and abetting the sale of 6.4 grams of cocaine. He served 23 years before being released on January 10th, 2020. He started a nonprofit organization called SAIL, Mississippi's Advocacy Initiative and Leadership that assists felons in returning back to society and advocating for those left behind due to unjust laws. He also works with at-risk youth, and he's very active in his community. Maurice, thank you so much for being here with us. It is a pleasure. Please enlighten us with your wisdom. We are ready.
Well, I hate to correct you, but it's Maurice.
Oh, excuse me. Oh.
So anyway, I'm Maurice Clifton. I'm from Mississippi, born and raised here in the Mississippi Delta. So I grew up amid poverty, racial profiling, and what we would call the 3/5 exception. But I think racial profiling started long before this continent was really even formed, before the 13 colonies and anything. Racial profiling started when the world powers sought bodies from Africa because of our stature, because of our knowledge, and because of all that we had, because of the resources in Africa. So they saw the biggest resources they took were our souls, our body. It's just like when you take plants from over there and transplant them over here in America and replant them and grow them. So I think racial profiling started with Lords of London stealing bodies and the slave trade and bringing them over here in the United States. We know that slaves were here before 1619, but America chooses to not take that date and run with it as the first slaves coming over, with some being indentured servant. That may be true, but if you look deeper in the surface, we had slaves in Massachusetts long before then. We had slaves in Louisiana long before then. And I think that it was a continual progression of racial profiling, in that it allows them to, it was in essence like black codes, like the black codes were. It was them taking us, putting us over here for free labor, but they spent so many centuries and so many years breaking us, breaking our strength, breaking our bond with Africa, with our language, with our culture, and with everything that we knew about Africa. So they had to basically keep a whole generation in the Caribbean. That's why we have so many slaves in the Caribbean, just to get us domesticated in order to be over here. That's like if you take a wild animal, you domesticate him, and you crossbreed him and you domesticate him, you sort of make him tame. I know people don't like to hear that, but that's just the simple truth. You know what I mean? Like Nebo said, we were once warriors, kings, and all that. We still are, because if 1% of that genes is still left in us, it can rise up anytime and we can be restored to greatness before. And I think that racial profiling gets people look at it and say, well, okay, if you're not in the right place, it's when people go out of their way to systematically bring us into their system. You see what I'm saying? So they went out of their way, they crossed many oceans, many waters to bring us into their system. And the sole purpose of that was, like he said, was profit. And so as slavery progressed, with the grew within the continental United States, and slavery got bigger, the South became bigger. You know, we got all these states. Even when Thomas Jefferson met at the Continental Convention in 1787, when they were meeting to talk about the 3/5 compromise and how they were going to count the slaves, because the South states like Mississippi and Alabama and Louisiana had so many slaves, it would give them an overwhelming majority of representation, in Congress. And so they didn't want, the North didn't want the South to have all that power. So what they said, that they would take they would count 3 of every 5 slaves, so thus giving us the 3/5 compromise. Even then, when Thomas Jefferson was trying to interject in the Declaration of Independence, when they was talking about the 3/5 compromise, he was telling them that the injustice of slavery was going to destroy our country if we didn't deal with it. But in the same breath, he owned a plethora of slaves at the same time, and everybody there, all of the attendees at the Continental Convention owned slaves. So they're saying that it's wrong, but none of them want to give up their slaves. The same way he said, the same way my prior speaker said, that Abraham Lincoln, he didn't care about ending slavery. The only thing he cared about was directing the wealth of the United States and controlling the wealth of the United States. The South had their own money. The town that I'm from, Mount Bayou, is founded by the former Confederate president's brother, Jefferson Davis. They're slaves from his plantation. So those slaves migrated up into the Mississippi Delta and formed their own town in Mount Bayou. I think that we get a bad rap, and me serving time in some of the worst prisons in the United States, guys have to go in wanting to rehabilitate themselves.
themselves.
We're on the outside. A lot of us want to fight on the outside for what guys do for about what people need on the inside. Don't get me wrong. There are a lot of people inside that need help, but there's still a lot of criminals inside. You know what I mean? That doesn't justify the institution of slavery that is now known as the criminal justice system. That doesn't justify that. But I'm saying that I think men and women can break that by breaking the cycle of recidivism. You know what I mean? By educating themselves. We had a lot of classes that were offered to us for free. We also had slave plantations in there in the forms of Unicor and in the forms of other industries, like MPIC and Unicor, where we're making them millions of dollars. I was a production clerk at Beaumont Penitentiary where we made $33 million a year, 5 years in a row. Wow. I think our payout salary was only $33,000. That's with everybody. We had a 24-hour shift. We were making helmets for the military when 9/11 hit. And so we made $33 million a year for 5 years. Where do you think that money went? That money went to big business. You know what I mean? So we can't, and us with Plus and everybody, I fight for people because I want them to come out and do better and not go back. But I think so many people don't give themselves the opportunity not to go back. Going back was not an option for me. According to man, I was still supposed to be incarcerated. I wasn't supposed to get out to 2029. But according to God, I'm sitting here talking to you now. And I vowed to make sure that every young teenage kid, male and female, know what lies ahead if he makes the wrong choice. Because racial profiling is designed to get you in front of the right judge, the right time, so they can railroad you and and flush you into the system. Once they flush you into the system, it's clogged up because the court cases, what they're doing, they're rubber stamping the same way they're rubber stamping the parole process, in the state and saying denied or giving them 2 or 3 years set off. The same way the federal prison don't have the federal prison doesn't have parole. What you get, you got to do 87% of it. Life sentence in the feds means a life sentence. And so we talk about the 3/5, the 3/5 compromise and the racial profiling. I think it's way bigger than that. Like the 13th Amendment said, except for part of it. When they created laws like vagrancy, just to take us here in Mississippi and put us and started Parchman, Mississippi. You know what I mean? And I took the job. Now I'm an employee at Parchman. I took the job just so I can help the young men see and give them a beacon of hope that their lives can be transformed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think that we focus so much energy on things that we're going to bump heads and we're going to spend so much energy that we're not going to get over the wall. Man, the goal is to remove the wall. To remove the wall is to, once we get our loved ones out, then we have to seek to keep them out by educating them. My story is when I first got out last year, January 10th, they got a bill. They got several organizations on the federal level. I did my time in federal prison. They got so many organizations that are supposed to help guys when they come out. Cut 50, NAM, and these people get money every year to help returning citizens readjust to society so they can take classes, so they can get loans and start their own business. But they walk around in $1,000 suits, jewelry and everything. When I got out, they called me the next day after I got out. My name was on the list because I was eligible for the Second Chance Act and some of the money to help me reintegrate back into society. Me being gone 23 years, I had lost everything. My wife got killed while I was incarcerated. I lost a son a month and a half before I got out. So I'm in Mississippi, in rural Mississippi, with no ride, living with my brother. They call me and tell me that they're going to put me with somebody. They're going to help me, give me some clothes. and everything, and they're going to help me, find some classes, go back to college and get my degree. Not one person called me within 2 weeks. And when I call them, they tell me that somehow my name must have got slipped, my name must have slipped through the crack. I said, well, okay, I'm here now. So where's my help? Or we're going to put you in contact with somebody in Mississippi. Nobody has ever called me since then. Me being a product of the street, I know that I have to get up, and even if I have to walk to work, like my parents did, and like my older brothers and sisters did, I have to get up and find a way and make a way for me to get back on my feet. But I know one thing: throwing rocks back at the penitentiary in the form of committing a crime is not it. It would have been easier for me to reoffend and get me 4 or 5 kilos and get back out on the street and become the same menace to society that I was before I went to the penitentiary. But the only thing that was going to give me was a life sentence, or me end up being killed here in the streets. So nobody in prison came back and told me the ills of incarceration. So what I do when I go to towns like Jonestown and talk to people, or Cleveland or Mile Bayou in my hometown, I try to tell the kids the ills of incarceration, because everybody thinks that they can handle incarceration because it's street cred. Sometimes they're getting so little time till they come back, they think that it gives them street creds. And so we got to, while we're fighting from the top, we got to also get on the street and fight from the bottom. Nobody's going back to the street. Nobody going back to the street telling this kid, because you're scared to face those kids. You know what I mean? I went and talked to some kids in the park about 2 weeks ago, and I think 4 out of 5 had weapons. But because I'm a product of the street and I'm from the street, I wasn't afraid, because I know I pose no threat to him. So I got to work the conversation in to teach him how not to be racially profiled. And so I tell him, if you get caught with that and you go to prison, or if the feds come in and they catch you and you and your homeboy, both of y'all in the same gang and y'all together, they can charge you with the RICO and give you a life sentence. Nobody is telling them that. You know what I mean? That they can spend the rest of their life. And every day I see kids, man, 14 and 15 years old with life sentence. And I think that the racial profiling with the justice system is when white prosecutors, choose to implement the habitual law. I see white guys in prison with 16 and 17 felonies. I see African American in prison with 2 and 3 felonies, but they got the habitual statute and they got a life sentence. You know what I mean? Nobody's telling that story. It's public record. You can get it.
And no one speaks to the fact that people really don't understand when they go to get their sentence, when those pleas are pushed on them, what that actually means in a lot of cases. So you're right. I mean, in a lot of our families, they don't understand that completely. And the lawyers who are representing them, those public defenders, are just pushed, trying to get them through the system the best way that they can. So you're absolutely right in that. And you said something very kind of, profound, that nobody is going back to the neighborhood. Nobody is going back to the troubled youth. And you're right. A lot of times people have the misconception that they don't want to listen anyways until they get themselves in a situation that they can't get out. And so how do you speak to that?
I think you speak to that is that if the first thing, people have to realize that the defense and the prosecutor work for the same bar system. There's no scale there. We talk about the scales of justice. He's not there to try to get you free. You know what I mean? He's there to make a profit. He doesn't care whether you go free or whether you go to jail. He's simply there to make a profit. And he's going to make that same profit whether you get 2 years, 20 years, or whether you get a life sentence. He's going to make the same money. It's the same surety bond that he's going to get, whatever it is, whatever the fee for him to be a public defender. And the same thing with a paid lawyer. He's going to fight only so far until then he's going to trade off a case, because it's a bigger fish behind with more money, that he's going to use that case to trade off with the DA or the prosecutors to get him free because he's going to make more money off him.
Yeah.
So we've monetized the system so much to where it's not an even playing field. When we come into the courtroom, the only thing we're a product of the state. That's it. If we win, we're a product of the state. If we lose, we're a product of the state. You understand? In the sense that now I know who you are. Now I'm going to be watching you. I beat the feds in 1995 and had quit hustling and moved to Killeen, Texas. They came back and came up with a bogus indictment and put me in the system. People look at that and say 6.4 grams. That's about the size of a quarter. And they gave me 400 months as a first-time offender. 400 months. And when they give it to you in the feds, they give you time in months. So I said, okay, they got 120 months, that's 10 years, 240 months, that's 20 years, 360, that's 30 years. So I got to do the same thing with the leftovers, with the 40 that's left over. You know what I mean? We're talking about 33 years, 4 months for somebody who had never been incarcerated, who had never served any time, rather. You know what I mean? I had a bond the first time. I put my house up the first time. My brother was my attorney. The second time, they said my brother couldn't represent me because it was a conflict of interest. Before they indicted me, they put they filed some kind of thing with the bar on him that suspended his license so he couldn't represent me. Because I know, and I feel like somebody who's an attorney, if they're your loved one, they're the only ones who's going to play fair within the judicial system because you're their loved one. And I was just thinking about something that Nebo said. He was talking about the coding and the software. No matter if we change the software, the programmers have been our oppressors for so many years. They program us to think like we do, to act like we do, not to love each other. You know what I mean? They've always sought to divide us and highlight our differences, so that we can't see our likenesses. You know what I mean? They're going to point out everything that's different between of us. They're going to give us different things that's going to divide us so much in the Black community. That's why when you go through so many cities, you got so many different. When you go to Chinatown, you don't see one barbecue joint. You don't see one pizza place. All you see is Oriental food or Chinese food, something related to Chinese stores or anything. You don't see anything in their communities. When you come to our communities, you see a Chinese flea market. If you're in Chicago, somewhere, you're going to see Arab flea market. You're going to see everybody else in our hood, and they're not spending any of that money. When you go to Greek town, the only thing you're going to see everything, all the food is dealing with Greek. All the stores are dealing with Greek. You're not going to see that. So we have deprived ourselves. We dislike each other so much that we won't even spend our money with each other.
You're right.
And nobody, why is it that we have more people of other races on the front line fighting for us in a cause as big as mass incarceration than our actual people? There are a lot of us, but we have just as many of another race. It's because nobody thinks about incarceration past their own loved one. If they have not been physically affected by incarceration, they don't think about coming out. Man, I don't care nothing about him. So what, man? He deserved to go to jail.
Absolutely right.
You know what I mean? And the same thing is and look at how our oppressors brought their kids out to lynching. They treated it as a picnic. You know what I mean? So he was telling his son that it's okay. He's on their property. I paid for him. I bought and paid for him, so I can do what I want to do with him.
Right.
His life has no value. It's okay. It's okay, Sally. It's okay, Tom. You know what I mean? Go get you a hot dog and come back, before we start the fire. That's real life Mississippi. People don't think about that.
Learn behavior, just the way that they learn behaviors is the same way that we learn behaviors. And so that speaks to what you're talking about. Why is it that why can't we come together and rise above?
I think that the first thing we have to do is put aside our pride, because if you get up and go to work every day, I think that, and you are able to buy you a nice car, according to our standards or according to society's standard. I think that people who get up and mismanage their money, they're going to hate on you because you took time to invest your money. You know what I mean? You took time to invest your money. So now that person that's hating on you is actually making more money than you. You know what I mean? But he knows he got another check coming. We're living from check to check. We're in a society where we don't teach our kids how to invest. We don't teach our kids, man, our oppressors send their kids to school to be business owners. We encourage our kids to go to school to be employees.
Yes, workers.
You see what I'm saying? That's what we send our kids to school. We don't encourage them to start their own business or send them to school to be an entrepreneur, you know, and start their own business. You know, that's the thing in the Black community, man. We have, and it started pretty much, you can say it basically started with Tuskegee, with the Missouri Compromise. You know,
Right.
when the founder of my town, I.T. Montgomery and Booker T. Washington fell out because the founder of my town said we can be doctors, lawyers, just like them. We can be our own doctors. We can be our own healthcare providers. You know, that's why they stopped, like the midwives, because because white doctors weren't making as much money because we had so many passed down African tradition to where, you know, our people were baby catchers or they were midwives. Right. You know what I mean? So, but Booker T. Washington wanted to say, well, this is the thing. We can be maids, car porters, we can farm for them. We can do all the things that we did in slavery, but we're going to be independent of them.
Yeah.
And so white people loved it and poured money into it. I don't take anything from his legacy or the man. I just think that, you know, the founding of the AT&Ts, you know, the Agricultural Institute was like us saying submitting or surrendering to. I understand that they had the power, you know, and then, you know, people, we say, look at what happened in Tulsa. Look at what happened at Kent State. You know, I understand that when we get our own, then they seek to destroy it. And it's okay for them to racially profile and use the military on us as a community, you know, in places like Black Wall Street or like Kent State or like Elaine, Arkansas. It's okay for them to do that, but the world don't say anything about it. They just brush it under the leaves. And here you come out with it 60 and 70 years later, and now you said it was a travesty, you know, or a tragedy. You know, then it was okay. But look how long you kept it hid. Look, you know, look how long it took to overturn or to start making amends with Biden's 1994 crime bill. You know what I mean?
Love amends, yeah, definitely, and it's the generational, racial profiling and generational learned behaviors that people are trying to steadily overcome. So a lot of times when I'm telling people, you know, I tell my daughter all the time, you gotta go work for somebody else, and I will quit a job in a second. Anybody who knows me knows. But the thing is that many of us will teach our children things that we're afraid to step out and do. And so that's a part of the process. And that's where, you know, wonderful people like yourself come in, actually going back and reaching into the communities and teaching people inside of the institutions and wherever you can be heard to know that you can be bigger and better than this in your current circumstance.
And then I just think that even if you look at how here in the Mississippi Delta, I don't know how they're doing anywhere else in the world, how they're taking thriving Black schools and Black communities and consolidating them with failing schools, like mixed schools, you know what I mean? And they're consolidating the money, the gerrymandering and everything, to where we keep our people so divided here in Mississippi so that we can't gain strength. You know, for the record, I voted from 2005 until I got out in 2020, every year, absentee ballot. You know what I mean? So you got to file for your right to vote if you're incarcerated. You know, so that's one of the things I did inside. You know, so I taught guys how to write resumes. I taught him to take his prison experience and put it on paper and show that You know, if you worked in the kitchen, this is the same thing that you do in a 5-star restaurant. You're working on the grill. It's a transferable skill. You got to take that transferable skills and know how to put it on a resume. You know, so I would take the dot code book and teach them the definition and the other dot code book. You know what I mean? And say that what you're doing in prison, whether you work at in Unicor as a sewing machine operator or as a machine operator, a press operator, this is a job that will pay you 6 figures on the street. You know, so you just got to take that transferable skill and learn how to, whatever he's doing in prison, and put it on paper. You know, and another thing that I started inside was Toastmasters. So many guys, there's a disconnect between white America and black America in our language. We simply don't understand each other. Somebody from Chicago can't understand somebody from Mississippi when they're communicating. So it's a disconnect. You know, so the thing that Toastmasters did in prison, we have so many guys in the federal prison that was from all over the world. You know what I mean? From Puerto Rico, Africa, you know, DC, Baltimore, Virginia, you know, California, everywhere. So all of us together, all of us speak a different language because all of our hoods is a whole set, just like each plantation had its own dialect, you know, and means of how the slaves communicated with each other. So does our hoods today. We in Mississippi communicate different than somebody in St. Louis, than somebody in Chicago. And so the thing is, we got to learn to break that language barrier, but nobody wants to come to the table to hear what the other person has to say. And when we get together, everybody think that what they have to say is more important than what I have to say. You know what I mean? And when it's all equally strong. No one straw in the bricks that when bricks were made with straw, no one straw was stronger than any other. No one fiber in a rope is as strong as the other. It's only strong because it's interwoven together, not because it's staying individually. Because if I unravel it and stay individually, then I'm not strong at all. So we have to become strong because we have to keep doing shows like this and interwove ourselves and create a fabric or a fiber that can break the system. You know what I mean? The old saying, the chain is only as strong as the weakest link. Yes. Man, we don't even, you know, I prefer to go to rope where we intertwine with each other because a link gives a person too much individuality. A rope is going to make you say, you know, if I get out, I'm going to make him weaker, and I'm definitely going to become weaker if I come out of the group. You see what I'm saying? So we have to intertwine ourselves with people with like mind, like yourself, you know what I mean, like Brooke, and like everybody who's going to speak the rest of this week, like Brother Terrence Coffey, you know, and all of us have our own personal issues that we're dealing with aside, but we sacrifice all the time. This is a sacrifice. You know what I mean? For you to be here and for everybody who's watching and everybody, because and the people who are watching are the people that want to change. There's some people watching that just want to say, oh man, they're doing the same old thing, they're doing the same old thing, they're doing the same old thing. Why? Because the coding in his software still has a bug in it from his oppressor. And you see what I'm saying? And he can't see the glitch. He can't see the glitch or the change that's in his mind. He can't see past his own face.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So he's too worried about yesterday. Man, I can't worry about them 23 years. I can't get those back. You know what I mean? So I have to fight for those that I can fight for today. You know, I have to be here when guys come out. You know, I want to try to give them some clothes, get on their feet. And it's not what I give them. It's the fact that I took time to get them something and give them something to reinforce that, man, you can make it. You control your destiny. They don't control your destiny. Yeah, they may consider you property, but you can rise above that and own them, you know, so to speak. Own them by what you accomplish and how much you do. You know, so that's my take on it, Lulu, man. I won't keep you, you know, I just think that we're misinformed on so many different levels. You know, I was just thinking about how our young kids, our juveniles, man, they're locking our juvenile up with truancy in the school system. And the parents are so quick to call the police not knowing that that truancy charge is going to be a charge that they can use to give him the habitual if he get caught up in the justice system. And it might have been him disrespecting the teacher. They don't look at it like that. They look at it as a truancy 7 or C7. You know what I mean? And he didn't do any time for it. You know, you got guys that had 2 Class A misdemeanors and catch a felony on the 3rd charge, they get a life sentence.
Yes.
Because they're misinformed. You're absolutely right, Angel. You know, that's our pipeline to prison. They're tricking us, man, into letting them put our kids in the system. Once we put our child in the system, he's in there for life. Just like the Social Security card, man. That document that said that once we came out of slavery, brought us back into slavery. But that's a topic for a whole nother day. You know what I mean? That's your identity and your property. It's not the number on the front. It's the number on the back. You know what I mean? It's the number on the back.
People don't even know about that at all. So you're right. That is a whole different topic, a whole different thing.
It's the number on the back that prison get paid. It's the number on the back that the state get the money every year for every person that's incarcerated. It's the number on the back that allowed Congress to say that every prison in the United States is entitled to a stimulus check.
Right.
It's not the number on the front. It's the number on the back that entitled that. Yeah. Why? Because you've been insurance for so long that you made them so much money. Yeah, I can give you this because you've made me 100 times more money with your incarceration. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Absolutely. So you got some folks checking the back of their Social Security card tonight for sure. That's a whole nother thing.
That's a topic for another day. The rabbit hole runs deep, you know. So I don't know. I just think that we as a people, in order to overcome, we got to stop looking at. See, let me say this: when I went to trial, right? Nobody other than one policeman that testified against me were white. Everybody that testified on me was African American. 2 didn't know me, and 2 grew up with me. I said that to say so many of us, and one of them wasn't even in jail, didn't have a pending charge. He just felt like he was doing a citizen's duty to come in and lie on me, but not knowing that, you know, he had got into some trouble and the police told him they'll make that go away if he come in and say this. So they give them a script to read. Yeah. You know, I think about all the people in the civil rights movement, other than us, that died for us. You know what I mean? I think about John Brown and Harper's Ferry. You know, when they told him, they offered him a chance to come off the gallows and just say, hey, John, just, you know, we'll let your son go and just say that you were wrong and everything. And we'll let you admit that you were wrong and everything. You know, he told them to hang my son with him. He made the choice of coming with me. You know that the institution of slavery is wrong. So he should die like I died. You know what I mean? As a martyr for slavery. Nobody's willing to risk their lives to get out on the front lines and to fight for us. When trouble comes, you know, and then everything we do in society is hyperalized. You know what I mean? In a sense to where, like, no matter what we do, if 4 or 5 of us get together, they're gonna say we're inciting a riot, you know, we're causing trouble, we're congregating. You can pass by any suburban city and pass by any Burger King at 2 o'clock in the morning, and you can see people tailgating, playing loud music, doing donuts in the parking lot. You know what I mean? White kids in the Burger King parking lot. But you let 4 or 5 of us get together, then the police come and they're going to round us up and take us to jail. You know what I mean?
And that's most definitely. That's the sad and unfortunate part of it all. You know, and we have to be able to pay attention to the bigger picture as it relates to racial profiling and how we are impacted on a generational level because of that, and what it requires of us as individuals who are aware of what what this means and what it looks like and the damage that it has caused to us and our families for generations and periods of time. So I definitely thank you, Maurice. I apologize for murking up your name a little bit earlier.
It's
Definitely
okay.
Maurice Clifton, for anyone who needs help. I thank you for joining us tonight. You've been a wealth of information.
Think about this on closing. Racial profiling is designed to first limit our education, second, to restrict our movement, and third, is to stop the assembly of African Americans. So whenever we come together, they're going to always try to, because they know that it's strength in numbers.
Right.
The first thing they're going to do, racial profiling, the first thing they're going to do, they're going to underserve us in the school system. So they're going to restrict our education because they don't want you to know. They don't want you to know how to get the money. Right. You know what I mean? Then they're going to restrict our movement. They don't want you to be able to go see your loved ones in and out of prison. So they're going to make it as difficult as it is. That's why I champion anybody that goes to visit their loved ones inside of prison, you know, or even go inside to teach a class. And the third is that they're going to stop us. They're going to do everything they can to stop us from coming together. Man, I love you guys. Thank you for having me. Take care and God bless you.
Thank you, Maurice. We really appreciate it. We're just going to move into our question and answer. So we'll bring Febo back and I'll take a look at some of the questions that we have, if we can get them answered, if they're related to your topics, so we can kind of get some of the questions answered. The first question says, by doing away with the 13th Amendment, how will it affect the prison system?
Who is it for? Either one of us?
I got it. I'm mute. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, brother.
After the 13th Amendment was passed, we entered in the United States history about 50 years worth of litigation, specifically around Section 2 of the 13th Amendment, which gives power to Congress to enforce. During that litigative process is where they came up with the Freedmen's Bureau. And that had to do with, you know, trying to restore some normalcy. Throughout all that, basically, in that litigation, they found what the Supreme Court ruled, that the Freedmen's Bureau's responsibility was to get rid of what was called badges and incidents of slavery. Right. And here we're saying any action that's being taken, say, in the prison system that resembles African chattel slavery, i.e., we don't call it the whole for no reason. It was called the whole. It's called the whole because it was called the whole during slavery, right?
Yep.
The brother in Texas that got a rope put around his neck, right, as he was being walked down the street and the cops were on horseback. Every time you have to show a travel pass when you go from state to state when you're on parole. Any solitary confinement, any conditions thereof. Again, wages and labor and how that looks, whereas state have within their administrative codes punishment towards those who refuse to labor, right? So if a CO walks up to you and says you have to go to work, you can't refuse that or you will be punished, right? That kind of stuff will get done away with. And again, I think there will be a natural decarceration as time goes on. And I think that this is our position to start really discussing not just the problems that we face, but what we're going to do to solve it. And I'm telling y'all that I work with government a lot. And just because you're in government doesn't mean that you know what you are doing, right? So you have a bunch of people sitting there who might have best interests at heart, but this requires further discussion. Our communities need to start speaking of what justice looks like, not just leaving it up for someone else to figure it out. There's a lot of programming models and organizations that have been doing great jobs around the country in establishing that. But the impact would be so multi-layered on the prison system. Now, just because we pass the law doesn't mean it's going to take place right away. We'd have to litigate. And that is clearly understood on behalf of the Abolish Slavery National Network. That is part of our strategy. Once we legislate, then we litigate. And it is when we get to that point, and in the ASNN, we have been, garnering support from lawyers and law-based organizations from around the country who agree with some of the strategy we spoke about in regards to how to litigate. Now, I'm not going to offer that information because that's the, that's the trick up the sleeve, but there is definite routes to litigate. These will probably end up being class action, either on the state level and federal level lawsuits that would force the changing of Fair Labor Standards Act, Fairness in Sentencing Act, any administrative codes that deal with punishment towards labor, any administrative codes that decree that labor must be cheap or free. A lot would change. A lot.
Okay.
I want to put. Can I play devil's advocate with that for a minute? I think that if they abolish the 13th Amendment, they'll change the name and call it something else.
Well,
that's what they did in slavery. That's what they did in slavery with General Order Number 3. You think about it, we spoke about Juneteenth, right? When they went to Texas and went to Galveston and read General Order Number 3. I want to read something from General Order Number 3. It says, this is from General, it said, this involves an absolute right of personal right and rights to property between former master and slave, and the connection hereto existing between them, between the employee, becomes that of employer and hired labor. The freedmen are advised to remain at their present home and work for wages. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts and that they will not be supported in idleness, either there or elsewhere. So even telling the slaves of Galveston that they were free, they encouraged them to stay there and work for their master. You're no longer a slave. You change it from employer to hired labor. You see what I'm saying? So I just think that they're going to reconstruct and find a way to, make the conditions better, but they're still going to keep that tight net. They're still going to keep that tight net to where they're going to get their free labor because it's money in the prison system.
Well, and that's possible. There was a Supreme Court case that was ruled in the state of South Carolina that required the state of South Carolina to pay a prevailing wage. So I do believe, I hear you and I hear the devil's advocate spin on that, but it's already starting to happen and I'm happy to provide y'all with that information. But if you look up a prevailing wage in South Carolina, and I'll be happy to get you the information on that lawsuit later, but that's already, kind of happening. That's something that has actually been in place. Someone had been fighting for, I think, 16 years. And, just finally, as of June or July, they, kind of put the kibosh on that thing and was like, look, I told y'all you need to pay this.
And they did it in Texas. They paid like 6 guys. When they paid them, they had 6 guys. That's what I say. Knowledge is power. The guys had filed a lawsuit with the Bureau of Prison about their Unicor wages so that they could get paid what they would make as a press operator on the street. The guys ended up winning. So what they did, they grabbed the guys up, shipped them to different prisons. You know what I mean? And told them that they couldn't, and settle with them, paid them back wages, but they couldn't go back in Unicor so that they couldn't educate anybody else. But the guys being selfishly motivated instead of helping the whole incarcerated population that worked in Unicor, took their money and ran. You see what I mean? Instead of spreading it to where, you could break their backs. You could break their Unicor's back within the federal system. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. And I think in some places there are practices put into place because I think in South Carolina, they absolutely filed it as a class action initially. They told them, no, you got to go back and do it through the grievance process. And so, you look at how they constantly are trying to be, 2 to 3 feet, steps ahead of you in regards to how it plays. But that's why I think, again, just circling back to Febo, it's important that we all play our part, and in regards to what it looks like. And it's important for there to be people, boots on the ground doing the work in regards to changing the legislative clauses inside of the Constitution, as well as people kind of coming in on the back door, hitting things from a different angle. So, there are quite a few different different things that are out there, and I won't take up all of our time today because we've been here just to be respectful of you all and the listeners. But, just to kind of think, this is how it works, and this is how we all have to work together. And this is why, even though you're doing something, it's not more important than what I'm doing, and it's not more important than what Febo's doing. And that's the type of collaboration that we need to understand. Because if I'm getting stung by one mosquito, I'm just scratching and batting off at one time. But if I'm getting stung in the back of my head, on the back of my neck, on my arm, on my legs, I got a whole bunch of different things that I got to try to take care of at one time. And that's how I look at attacking the system. But I'll just go to the next question. I'm sorry. Hope y'all don't have anything else to add to that.
No.
Good. Question says, what political party should we join to fight this, or are they all on? Anybody?
Yeah, go ahead, my brother.
I think it's funny, the paradox that when I go out, when I'm running groups and I'm talking to people and I go, raise your hand if you're a Democrat. Everybody raise their hand. If everybody here tell me what the word Democrat means, everybody lowers their hand. I never get an answer. I say the same thing with Republicans or liberals or conservatives, that we have these vague, open-ended concepts. When we talk about political parties in the United States, we're talking about two private entities. They're not government. The RNC and the DNC are private entities, right? And I think a lot of us don't understand that. People think that this is what you're supposed to do. We've been brainwashed into the two-party system, and we've been brainwashed to believing that the party that was responsible for trying to maintain slavery is the party that we're supposed to be aligned with, versus the party who's fighting against slavery is now the party that's against us. So I think it's funny that we live in that paradox. I would say, for me, like any other construct, it's a tool, right? Use the tool as you see fit. If you're getting attached to the identity, then we have a problem, right? You really think you're a Democrat. You really think that. You really think they're a Republican. Now we got it confused, right? It's an understanding that it is a tool to be used. If you somewhere and you think being a Republican is going to help you and your people out, jump on the party. If you think that's what's going to help you, right? But I think that when we start getting into these absolute definitions of whether, quote unquote, our people should be dealing with, quote unquote, their people, we understand that this whole government political structure is set up on money as well, right? It's all about money. And it's hard for us to have a seat at the table if we ourselves don't have an economy to battle against it. So we're always left up to their decision making and what even back, if you look at Puerto Rico and any of the other territories that they're holding, where the United States justifies holding such territory because they believe that we were juvenile at mind. They believe that we were incapable of governing. It literally says juvenile at mind, that we were incapable of governing ourselves, right? And if you go to Puerto Rico, which is a territory, we are all U.S. citizens. We campaign about our status and relationship to the United States, not about any other important political topic that we need to discuss. And the people hit the streets during election season, whether they want to be independent or they want to be a state. And at the end of the day, their vote does not matter. As U.S. citizens who contribute to the primary system, if you don't believe me, Hillary Clinton beat Obama in the primaries. Nobody says that out loud. She beat Obama because she got the votes from Puerto Rico. But because they didn't want to count Puerto Rico because Puerto Rico doesn't count in the general election, they ignored Hillary Clinton's delegates for the DNC and they still gave it to Obama anyway. And as a Puerto Rican, having an absolute understanding that neither one of these parties, pardon my French, mean shit, because it doesn't do anything for us. It continues to maintain the system of oppression that we find ourselves in. And I myself would never get it twisted to think that that's what's going to help out. Again, it's a tool. Use it if you see necessary.
Thank you, Febo. It says, the next question says, Mississippi didn't certify the flawed 13th Amendment until 2013, 148 years after its passing. So my question is for Dennis, What are some suggestions or advice you would give to individual activists and small activist groups in places like Mississippi to push the abolishments of modern day slavery?
Absolutely, easily respondable. 25 of the states did not properly ratify the 13th Amendment. Ratification means they all vote, passes on the federal level, they make an announcement to all the states it was passed. Those states write that language into their own constitution. 25 states did it, the other 25 didn't, including the state of New Jersey where we're campaigning. For the states that wrote it in, you campaign to amend the language already. Like Colorado, they had the same language. Slavery and involuntary servitude are illegal, except as punishment for a crime. Colorado changed it to slavery and involuntary servitude are illegal, period. There's no exception, right? Here in New Jersey, we have no language, but we're going to add language that would state slavery and involuntary servitude are illegal, including as punishment for a crime. Or other language could be slavery and involuntary servitude are forever prohibited, including as punishment for a crime. So when you campaign for a state of Mississippi who doesn't have the language, you're going to start a ballot initiative to add language to the Mississippi Constitution. If it's already present, then you campaign to remove the exception clause and add language of perpetuity, like saying forever prohibited, and allude to including as punishment for a crime. For the small organizations, really just start holding groups and a lot of education. You got to get a lot of people behind you. And the problem is most of us don't know this. I've spoken to politicians who've been politicians for 20, 30 years. The last guy was like, you mean to tell me slavery's still legal? And I'm like, you mean to tell me you've been a politician for 20 years and you never read the U.S. Constitution?
Wow.
Right? This is what we're really dealing with. Since so many people don't know, if you're starting from the ground up, it's a lot about education. Once you guys start networking, what we did here in Jersey is I put a call out. Any organization that stands with the abolishment of slavery, we had orgs reach out from everywhere. And we put that list together and we started pushing. Another thing you could do in the state is, say you guys live in a city or a town where you guys know you have enough plug. You can ask the city, and I did it here in New Jersey, 6 different cities, Patterson, Atlantic City, Jersey City, big cities, pass resolutions to stand with the abolishment of slavery. And we kind of used all that information to create the push on the legislative side. The other end is going to be is that I need y'all to understand the opposition is already organized against this. The DOJ doesn't want to see this happen. They're already fighting against us here in New Jersey. I know this issue is it, because why else would they step up? Why else would they 100% come in to show up to try to cover their ground? But we smarter than them. And I know, because I know for them to come to us meant that they went and sat in a meeting around the conference table and they discussed all of the implication what this would look like. And when they found that the system would crumble without legalized slavery, they started organizing and pushing back. If you guys observe how those 9 white Republicans came in Louisiana and voted to keep slavery, they did so already knowing how they were going to vote, which means they sat down and spoke about it before they walked in that room.
Right.
So if y'all are going through all those measures, that means we on to something, right? So I need you to understand that there will be opposition. And our typical lobby campaign, call your legislator, that typical work ain't going to work by itself. You're going to have to step it up. And from what I've been learning here in Jersey, since we've been able to beat the ICE contracts, where that they found the individuals. So this is what I want to get at. If I'm saying the police department, I'm not going to say police department. That's a vague concept. It's an imaginary one. I'm going to call it by the chief of police's name. Put the faces to it. Hold the individuals responsible, because if we get them on camera or we get them in writing, using their position of power to maintain a system of slavery, we have evidence that they are violating international human rights, which is why that senator said, you can't come after me, I have immunity. Because they know they're breaking the law. Who are the real criminals? Who are the real criminals when we talk about criminals against humanity?
Right.
Now, who's collecting the evidence? who's going to prosecute it. And this is where I was going to add in that if we look at what happened during George Floyd, Minnesota has a Department of Human Rights. Who pushed on the lawsuit for George Floyd's family? The Minnesota Department of Human Rights. Only about 6 states in the union have one. Louisiana is one of them. And when you go on their website, it gives you 2 buttons you can click, one for wages, one for labor. We're already pushing on the human rights route. I think this issue will allow us to do so. Like Malcolm X said, we're not going to resolve the issue, the plight of our black families and our black people unless we start talking about human rights, right? And it was the moment that he started talking about that things got a little bit dangerous for him. But we're not in the 70s no more. We got social media. We don't need one leader standing up in the front to tell us what to do. We have the right and the ability to organize as such. Excuse me. And if we're pushing on rights are not something that are given or held, we fight for. So how do we start fighting for our humanity? It's not going to happen in civil law. The original 13th Amendment, with its 20 sections, Section 12 stated, African descendants shall never be citizens. It was their intention from the beginning.
Right.
So what in international law, it states that no person shall not be stateless. So we have a whole population of stateless people who don't have claim in international human rights law because we fall under the identity of being American. So we're already spoken for. So what would it look like to counter that? We can organize heavy around that. And I've already pushed it a couple of times. If Louisiana is doing it, Illinois has one. There's a couple of states that are using it. Why don't we start putting pressure? Hey, by the way, if you're the Department of Human Rights, what code do you follow? They better say the International Declaration, because where else do they get human rights from? Oh, so in that International Declaration, what does Section 4 say again? Slavery is abolished in all of its forms. Now we put them on notice, in writing, in public, on camera. You are practicing, you are breaking the law. But we haven't done that. We haven't done so in an organized fashion. And to see George Floyd's family be successful through that approach, and God bless their lawyers for helping to push that, to me was a show and a display that this is absolutely possible. If we're amending on the national level, they can ship them wherever they want. It's illegal anywhere you go. You could call it wherever you want, but we have standards in law, whether it be international, as ratified by the United States Slavery Conventions. They were already ratified. It's already law. We're just not holding them accountable. We don't have the right lawyers going up there and suing their asses for what they're doing. Most of these lawyers are being picked up, especially when you're behind the wall and you're trying to find a good lawyer, which is really hard to do, that you're going to say that this guy or this lady is going to actually help me out. We need a convening. We need all these people talking, and this is funny, this conversation has shaken the ground for slavery reparations.
Yeah.
How can you repair something that ain't over? And if you're creating a tab of money based on what you think ended in 1865, I'm telling you, the clock kept going 150 years later, which all it's really going to do is strengthen that they need more money on that bill.
Yeah.
Right? So again, we're putting like the right to vote. You don't need to fight that. Fight the 13th Amendment. The right for fair wages. You don't need to fight that. Fight the 13th Amendment. Politicization, all of it, we can target through the root. Again, but if we have to do so in a very organized fashion and with a lot of convening around these issues so that we know what we're doing on a mass scale, then and only then it would work. If you get a couple of guys suing, they're going to chew them up. They don't have backing, right? So they can hide and pretend that nothing's going on. But we got the whole country, all of us doing it at the same time, all pointing fingers. Now we have a better chance at putting that pressure.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that answer. Maurice, did you have something to add to that before I ask this next question?
No, go ahead. You can go ahead.
All right. So the next question is, I'll direct it to you yet again, because I think Febo gave his information and we put it in the chat. But if you guys want to repeat it, if you can let us know, how can we connect with you all to bring what you are doing to our cities and our states? Please let us know now at this time.
Amen. Just go to abolishslavery.us There is a contact form. Fill it out, and we will reach out to you. We'll build with you. If you are in a state that has a movement, we'll plug you to that movement. If you are in a state that doesn't have a movement, we will coach you on how to begin one. That is our role. Myself and Max Partis and Savannah Eldridge are co-directors for state operations. So our role is to train any state movement, grassroots organizations that want to come together to understand what this process is and what would need to get done. So again, abolishslavery.us.
All right, thank you, Febo. And Maurice, how can we get connected?
Mine is sellwithsippy@gmail.com. You can reach out to me, and I have a YouTube channel called Sell with Sippy.
All right.
So, yeah, you can reach out to me, and my information is in there.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
Looks like we have somebody put it in the chat. So that's right. And then we have it up on the screen. So if you guys, or if anyone would like to get connected with Sell with Sippy, please contact them at sellwithsippy.com or at gmail.com, and then the abolishslavery.us, and we will get you connected so you can be a part of the movement. I thank you all for joining us today. I thank for all the wealth of knowledge and education. I think it's really important that we get on and we're face to face with people, because people don't necessarily always read anymore. A lot of times they would rather just listen to someone tell them, and that can be problematic in a sense. But I know that we have two powerhouse men sitting before us that have given us and imparted upon us some very good wisdom. So thank you all for being with us today. I'm not sure if there's any representative from the Plus organization that would like to speak, but today was a pleasure, and I look forward to you all being here with us for the rest of this week for the new Jim Crow week daily seminar. Looks like Brooke is.
I apologize. I didn't realize I was muted. This is Brooke with the National Plus Coalition. I just wanted to say that if you are interested.
Looks like Brooke dropped off. So looks like she was going to say that if you are interested in getting involved and being a part of the National Plus Coalition, you can also reach them. I'll let her give you the contact information for Plus, and I believe she's back on. Brooke, go ahead.
I apologize. I was trying to fix where I have his email wrong. That is supposed to be sailwithsippy@gmail.com.
It's our PPR.
So if you would like to get in contact with Plus, you can email us at events at the National Plus Coalition or message our page, the National Plus Coalition. And please tune in all week. We have a lot of great speakers for the rest of the week also. And a big thank you to Lulu, to Dennis, and to Maurice. We appreciate all of you. And you guys have gave so much information, and it's been an honor.
Thank you so much.